When we struggle to be thankful, we struggle with our happiness. Hello, friend. Today we're going to look at a couple verses on thankfulness, how it'll change our hearts from ones of lack to ones of thankfulness, and how that affects us on a personal level. First, we're going to look at Philippians 4:6. There it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." What the heck is supplication? That might be what you're asking. And it's just to plead humbly. But in that passage, it says, with everything, with thanksgiving. Let's just be clear. This guy struggles with that. And I think you probably do too. Let's look at one more before we dive in further, and that's Colossians 4:2. And there it says, "Continue steadfastly praying, being watchful in it with thanksgiving." So how do we apply these? Prayer needs to be a part of our lives, and it's in prayer that it can grow our thanksgiving. And the second one is to just be watchful. To be watchful for thanksgiving? What is that talking about there? And it's like, look for things to be thankful for. Like, look, use these God-given things. So here's the 5 ways that I think we can apply these verses so that we do those 2 things. Number 1, we look backwards on our life, not just walking backwards. That'd be weird. But you're going to look backwards on your life. Look back at points in your life. Where did God's faithfulness show up? If you have a hard time with that right now, and you may, that's okay. Don't be upset with yourself. But that's showing that you're cauterizing, you're hardening your heart, because our God is a faithful God. And in our lives, when we look at it, we can spot times where he was faithful to us when we didn't deserve it. And one of the great things that I've done in my life that has really impacted it is writing down what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and what God is doing in my life. Because our human nature is to plead for God, receive it, and then forget about it. See, it's when we look back on the faithfulness that he has been in our lives, it gives us thanksgiving for today. Because I am so incredibly thankful for what God has given me in my life. I am thankful for my wife. I am thankful for my children. I'm thankful for this house I'm in. There's this thing called hedonic adaptation, which basically is you and I stop seeing things in our lives. Like things that God has given you, things that he has been faithful with. If it's a normal part of your everyday life, you get blind to it. Here's the thing. I have an incredible view at this house that I'm in. We get to see sunsets every evening. When we first bought the house, my jaw dropped every evening. The other night I was doing something outside and the sky lit up just this beautiful red. And I stopped and I noticed and I saw it. Here's the thing. It's been doing that every night lately. But I wasn't stopping. I wasn't noticing. I just took it for granted. That's what we need to do. That's what we do. So write down where God's been faithful so that you can recall in those moments where you're not feeling thankful. All right, number 2, look forward in anticipation. This gives us thanksgiving. How do we do that? By worshiping. That's how we do it, by worshiping God. When we worship God, which is valuing him above all else, we have no choice but to be thankful. You think about that for a second. When you're looking at your future, when you're not feeling thankful about what's to come, are you in points of worship? Think about that for a second. When you're in these points where you're not in thankfulness, you're in the grumbly state that we all find ourselves in. I don't think you're worshiping God at the same point in time. I don't think those 2 things can coexist. They haven't in my life. When I'm worshiping the creator of the universe, when I'm seeing the hugeness and the vastness of who God is, and I'm worshiping that, I am thankful. Because my heart and mind are fixated on who God is, not what's going on in my life. Number 3, prayer. See, the scripture talks about in praying. Both things are talking about prayer in our life. And it's in prayer oftentimes where it ignites our worship. We're telling God who he is, who we know him to be, what scripture says he is, how he cares for us. It's in those moments where worship is ignited. It's also in those moments where we can stop and use prayer, listening prayer, where we're just sitting in the presence of God and he's reminding us who we are to him. And those very moments of listening prayer, when God reminds me of who I am to him, I just become thankful. When I'm combining the worship of how great he is and how he views me, everything changes. And that happens when I'm praying. See, the other thing that it talks about in those verses is bringing our requests to him humbly. Like that's another way in our prayer. Are you talking to God? Are you asking him for things? Are you asking him for your needs? Are you doing it in a humble posture? See, I like to ask him for what I want in more of the spoiled brat kind of way. Like sometimes that's where I go. God, why are you doing this to me? Which is fine. But remember, this is talking about coming humbly. And in those moments when I'm in that spot, still talk to God, still talk to him when you're there. But it needs to come back to this humble spot, which happens when I'm telling him how great he is and when he's reminding me of how he views me and that he loves me. When that starts happening, my grumbly little spoiled brat version of myself starts to subside. And the humbleness of how small and insignificant I am, but still valued and loved by God, when that starts coming to the surface, the thankfulness starts welling up. Number 4, we express our thankfulness. This can happen verbally or written, but we believe more from what comes out of our mouth than what we hear. And so verbalizing our thankfulness is super important. If you're thinking about it and ruminating on it, that's a good thing, but it still needs to come out. And this can raise our hearts in thankfulness. That's why when we're praying, it's great to pray just in your mind, but honestly, a lot of times it's more powerful to verbalize it, even when you're alone. Verbalize to God what you're thankful for. Number 5, this honestly is not in those verses I just read, but I still think it's super important. And even though we believe more of what comes out of our mouth than what we hear, around us everywhere is really negativity. You don't have to go very far to find negative people. And I have found I am much more thankful when I'm around people that are thankful. Surround yourself with community. There are verses that talk about not forsaking the gathering, being around people, and that being super critical. It is super critical that the people you're around are thankful and grateful. Doesn't mean you avoid all people that aren't doing well. It does mean that your tight-knit community is one that is a group of thankful people who are worshiping God. Because sometimes on your lowest days, their thankfulness can ignite your thankfulness. And I hope that this Thanksgiving, you will be thankful and grateful because he is worthy to be praised. Have a great day, and God bless you.